Well, today's reflection will be a bit like an Ignatian examen. That's why I have a mirror behind me. It represents our inward looking, where I do feel confident of this. We'll find a lot of wonderful and worthy qualities to encourage us for the journey on the Christian road, just like James and John had these qualities. I don't often wonder how I would answer Jesus if he asked me specifically, "What do you want from me?" as he asked James and John. Instead, I like to think about the ways that I plan on serving him in the future. Typically, what is ahead is always, in my imagination, better than what I'm actually doing or have done. I like to dwell on the coming times because I believe somewhere deep down in that primal divided sections of my heart that if I do a good job in conducting my, say, ministerial duties or parental duties, I'll get what I want from Jesus in this lifetime. And what is that want exactly? Oh, I guess it's assurance that if I've performed well enough, I won't have to go through any unnecessary pain and suffering. I admit that is what my basest self hopes for. And I believe that's what John and James wanted too, besides a throne, as they fully believed that Jesus would attain glory during their lifetimes, and it wouldn't look like suffering and death on a cross. Today's readings are about the way of Christianity, which is the way of that cross. Everyone who wants to follow Jesus and meet him in his glory will have to overcome their James and Johnnesses and be prepared to drink from Jesus' cup, that of pain, suffering, and eventually death. I see a lot of people wearing, diamond encrusted crosses as jewelry lately, getting tattoos on their body with crosses, making pilgrimage to far off places that have a cross that they can put themselves in front of at the end. And I wonder, what does the cross experience mean to them? Have they already been through it? So that's what is driving their more culturally fashionable ways of declaring their faith? Or did they have a soft landing after their trials and are in a thanksgiving mode? Or are they still suffering from a specific heartache? Or have they not yet encountered what it really means to carry a cross? In that case, do we interpret their cross symbolism as chaotic or romanticized or mythical? I don't know what everyone's personal story is, but I do know that to meet Jesus, it's only really possible by bearing our own crosses. Jesus traveled through Palestine, serving each person he met along the way. That's our way too. The best of us wear and bear our crosses internally, invisible to other people. Having a lot of James and Johnnesses doesn't mean that we're bad people, though. Our humanity, including our sinful leaning natures, is what Jesus came to redeem. He knows who we are, more even than we know ourselves. Being James and John can come with wonderful qualities. The first one is, even with such a hodgepodge of delirious instincts that they had, we know James and John had put their faith in the right person. They believe that their faith in Jesus will help him and themselves to prevail. They trust him, his word, his power, his leadership, his mission. Their hopes and future are rooted in Jesus. They cannot live without him. So our first examined question is that how we feel about Jesus and our relationship with him? We cannot live without him? Secondly, James and John are also ambitious for the reign of God to reveal itself on earth. They want Jesus glorified. And that means they want justice to be delivered to their society. The brothers want to help Jesus achieve this. However, Jesus redirects their striving for greatness by giving them a radically different version of what it means to be great. We can see that God was working with their desires to seek a better world. Desire isn't bad for our spiritual lives. Cynicism, complacency, carelessness, they are. Desires are redirected, but our unwillingness to care, our numbness of soul, those are roadblocks to abundant grace and transformation. Or a second examined question is, have we remained open-hearted enough to desire and give ourselves over to a better world? Will we work for it? And finally, even though James and John make an audacious request of Jesus, they're not afraid to ask. This implies that they were in a real relationship with Jesus, and they weren't afraid to develop that. And they weren't afraid of him. They want to stay close to him. As I reflect on this, I'm reminded how often I don't ask, I don't engage, and I don't lean. How often do I go through my days as if God doesn't really exist, even as I profess to be God's child, follower, and friend? Real relationships require honest engagement. We only learn how to serve when we remain close to Jesus. So our last question is, how am I keeping my engagement with Jesus alive? Ultimately, God transformed James and John. At the end of their lives, these men, known as sons of thunder, maybe because their bumbling was so loud, became known for something else. James was the first apostle to be martyred, and John wrote the Gospel of John, as well as several other epistles. God made James and John into different people than they were before, and the same can happen for us, especially if we embrace the cross with the three qualities that the brothers embodied: faith in our right person, desire for a better world, and engagement with the elements of life that can make it all happen. We will suffer regardless, but we will attain our full glory with Jesus.